The air in Federal Courtroom 3B felt heavy, filled with tension and a quiet sense of unease. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting a sharp glare across polished wood and the faces of everyone in attendance. Within minutes, a moment would unfold live, one that many believed would leave a lasting impression on the public. Justice Clarence Thomas, known for his reserved presence on the bench, delivered a statement before the trial had even officially begun. His deep, steady voice cut through the low murmurs in the crowded room, directing attention squarely at Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. "Treason," he said, the word echoing through the courtroom with striking force. Cameras quickly focused, capturing every subtle reaction and broadcasting the scene to millions of viewers across the country. He spoke about legal consequences, outlining serious and lasting implications. The room grew still. People waited for a response, perhaps outrage, perhaps visible distress, or a break in composure that such a serious accusation might normally provoke. Yet no one in that room, not the uneasy senators seated in the back, not the reporters leaning forward with pens ready, and not even Justice Thomas himself, was prepared for what followed. Jasmine Crockett had not entered the courtroom to simply defend herself. She arrived with a sense of purpose, carrying information she clearly believed was important and long overlooked, information that could challenge the narrative unfolding around her. The tension had been building from the moment the heavy oak doors opened. Conversations stopped mid-sentence as attention shifted toward the entrance. Then she appeared. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett walked in with measured, steady composure, completely alone. There were no attorneys beside her, no aides carrying documents, no visible support team, just her. Her figure stood out against the light from the doorway. She wore a tailored navy blue suit, professional and understated, reflecting control and focus. In one hand, she carried a worn brown leather briefcase, suggesting preparation and intent rather than simple formality. Her hair was neatly pinned back, emphasizing practicality. The sound of her heels echoed across the marble floor, each step deliberate and precise, adding to the already tense atmosphere. She did not look around at the crowd, at the senators, the press, or the observers quietly whispering among themselves. Her attention remained fixed ahead on the table where she would stand. Behind her, murmurs began to rise. "Is that really her?" someone whispered. "She's alone?" Speculation spread quickly, mixed with curiosity and doubt. Some expected the situation to overwhelm her. A few exchanged quiet remarks, anticipating a difficult moment under pressure. When she reached the table, Jasmine placed her briefcase down carefully. The worn leather stood in contrast to the polished surroundings. She opened it slightly, revealing only a glimpse of what was inside, then rested her hands calmly on top. Her posture remained steady, composed, and focused. At that moment, the doors at the front of the room opened again. Justice Clarence Thomas entered, wearing the traditional black robes of his position. His presence carried authority, and his expression remained firm and controlled. Without delay, he moved to begin the proceedings. Before the room had fully settled, his voice rang out, clear, direct, and authoritative. "Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett," he began, each word measured and precise. "This court has received classified information indicating that you may have withheld military intelligence related to an operation identified as Hollow River." He paused briefly, allowing the statement to register. "You are being formally accused of actions that may constitute treason against the United States. You will respond under oath." A wave of reaction moved through the courtroom. One person dropped a pen, the sound echoing in the silence. A reporter quietly expressed surprise, audible to those nearby. A few exchanged uncertain looks, reflecting confusion more than certainty. The atmosphere shifted, filled with disbelief and tension. To some observers, the moment appeared to signal serious consequences for Crockett's career. Others watched closely, unsure of what would come next. Yet at the center of it all, she remained still. Jasmine Crockett did not react outwardly. She held her composure, steady and focused, as the weight of the moment settled around her. Jasmine stood slowly and with intention, her chair making a faint scraping sound against the stone floor. She placed both hands flat on the table, looked directly at the judge, and asked in a low but steady voice, "Are you sure you want this?" The question was not loud or openly defiant, yet it carried noticeable weight. It reflected confidence, not urgency, the kind that comes from something firmly grounded. The room went still, completely still. Even Justice Thomas hesitated, if only for a brief moment. His lips parted slightly and his eyes narrowed, not only with concern but also with careful thought. Beneath the authority of his position, there was a sense of recalculation. It seemed clear that he understood something had shifted. Jasmine Crockett was not approaching this as a routine trial. She had come prepared for a serious confrontation, and whatever she carried in her briefcase appeared to hold significance the courtroom had not yet fully realized. With attention fixed on her, she reached into the case. The soft click of the latch echoed in the silence. Jurors leaned forward and reporters paused, expecting legal documents or a formal response. Instead, she removed a single letter. It was worn and fragile, folded into thirds with deep creases from repeated handling. The edges were softened and slightly curled. Faint marks, possibly ink, dirt, or tears, stained one side near the fold. A light coffee stain spread along the bottom edge, and a tear across the crease had been repaired with aging tape. This was not an ordinary document. It appeared to carry personal meaning and history. Jasmine held the letter carefully in both hands, allowing its condition to speak before she did. "This is not evidence," she said in a calm, steady tone. "This is a truth we were never meant to see." With that, the atmosphere in the courtroom began to change. The setting no longer felt focused on legal strategy or political positioning. It became quieter, more reflective, as if something deeper was about to be acknowledged. She unfolded the letter with care, smoothing each crease as though preserving its importance. Then she began to read aloud. The room fell silent. "My name is Mara Wilkins," Crockett read, her voice steady but carrying the emotion of the words. "I am the mother of Private First Class Darius Wilkins. He was my only child." She paused briefly before continuing. "He died 2 years ago during an army operation. They told me nothing." The simplicity of the statement stood out. "They came to my door with a flag and 3 uniformed men. They called him a hero. They said he served with honor, but they never told me how he died. They never told me why." A quiet reaction moved through the room. A journalist paused mid-typing. One senator, previously leaning back, shifted forward with renewed attention. Crockett continued, her tone steady and controlled. "I asked questions. They said it was classified. I pleaded. They said it was for national security. But when I closed his bedroom door that night, the silence felt overwhelming. I knew something was wrong. I felt they were hiding something." A sense of discomfort spread among those listening. The words reflected a familiar frustration, grief met with limited answers. Still, Jasmine's voice remained composed, guided by the letter. "For months I couldn't sleep. I started hearing his footsteps again, imagining him walking through the house. Sometimes I thought I heard him laugh, only to remember he was gone." The line affected the room in a noticeable way. Subtle reactions followed, quiet sniffles, lowered gazes. What many had expected to be a political exchange had become something more personal. Even those who had remained skeptical seemed to reconsider their focus. The moment was no longer centered on Jasmine Crockett. It was about a mother seeking clarity. "I'm not writing this because I want someone punished," she read. "I'm writing because I want someone to tell the truth. I want someone to say my son mattered. That his life was more than a line in a report." Jasmine paused, allowing the silence to settle naturally across the courtroom. When she looked up, the mood had clearly shifted. Expressions that once showed doubt or detachment were now more serious and reflective. Jurors sat quietly, some looking down, others focused ahead. One juror, a middle-aged man and retired Navy veteran, pressed his thumb lightly to the corner of his eye while staring at the floor. A court reporter paused, hands hovering above the keyboard. The gallery, filled with experienced observers, remained still. What had started as a high-profile proceeding now felt more reflective, as if those present were being asked to consider something deeper than legal arguments. No one interrupted the silence, not even the judge. Without raising her voice or presenting formal arguments, Jasmine Crockett had shifted the focus of the room. She had drawn attention to a personal story that resonated beyond the immediate case. She carefully folded the letter along its worn lines and placed it back on the table. Her hands rested calmly, though the weight of the moment remained clear. The letter had revealed a mother's grief and raised questions about unanswered details surrounding Darius Wilkins' death. Yet it was also clear that emotion alone would not be enough to challenge official accounts. With a soft but deliberate motion, she opened her briefcase again. The atmosphere shifted once more. The emotional weight lingered, but now there was a sense of anticipation. This time she removed a stack of documents, formal, printed, and structured. The cover page read, "Declassified Top Secret Operation Hollow River." Though the original classification marking had been crossed out, its significance remained clear. She placed the documents neatly on the table, her movements precise and controlled. Judges, clerks, and observers leaned forward slightly. Cameras focused in. "I am entering these into the public record," Jasmine said calmly. "These are not assumptions or interpretations. These are federal records that were unsealed 7 days ago." A few quiet reactions came from the back of the room, but she continued without pause. She lifted the first page, holding it forward. At the top, the title, Operation Hollow River, was clearly printed. Below it were detailed entries, timestamps, coordinates, unit identifiers, and procedural notes. Sections that had once been redacted were now fully visible. She turned to another page, guiding attention to a specific entry. Her voice remained clear and measured. This report was filed 48 hours after Private First Class Darius Wilkins was officially declared deceased. Her finger traced a line on the page as she read slowly, ensuring every word was understood. Subject showing signs of life during extraction. Breathing shallow. Field medic notified. No follow-up recorded. The words settled over the courtroom in silence. No immediate reaction followed. The information spoke for itself, leaving those present to process its implications. Darius Wilkins had been alive when they found him. The subdued laughter from earlier disappeared, replaced by quiet shock and uneasy movement in seats. This was not a delayed discovery or a vague misunderstanding in a chaotic situation. It was a clear note in an official report, followed by silence. A specific observation recorded and then left without action. A life that may have been lost not only due to injury, but also because of decisions that were never fully addressed. A young juror near the front let out a small, involuntary gasp before covering her mouth. The court clerk stared at the document as if unsure how to process it. A reporter in the front row, known for remaining composed, quietly mouthed a brief expression of disbelief. His usual detachment seemed to fade. Jasmine placed another page on the table without comment. This one included a logistic signature block from Strat Defense Solutions, the private contractor previously mentioned in connection with the operation. Their corporate logo was visible, and beneath it was a detailed list of medical equipment assigned to the extraction team. Certain items were highlighted. A portable defibrillator was missing. An emergency field kit had been left unsecured near the area where Darius was treated. The earlier explanation of an unavoidable loss began to weaken, replaced by a pattern suggesting possible oversight, missing equipment, and a failure to respond to reported signs of life. The documents pointed not only to operational issues, but also to decisions that raised serious questions. The room grew quieter, the atmosphere more focused. Then Jasmine reached into her briefcase again. This time she did not take out another document. Instead, she held up a printed photograph. It was candid, slightly grainy, but clear enough to identify the individuals. Two men sat at a table in what appeared to be an upscale restaurant. Plates of food were in front of them and glasses were raised mid-toast. On one side was Justice Clarence Thomas. On the other was Leonard Kenner, CEO of Strat Defense Solutions. Jasmine said nothing further. The image spoke for itself, raising questions about connections and potential conflicts. Clarence Thomas shifted slightly in his chair. His expression, usually controlled, showed a subtle change. His eyes tightened and his jaw set. The earlier murmurs and quiet reactions in the room faded. The tone had shifted again. What had once seemed like a routine proceeding now raised broader concerns about impartiality and oversight. The documents had already introduced questions about the operation. The photograph added another layer, prompting further consideration of relationships connected to the case. The focus of the proceedings began to move away from the initial accusation against Crockett. Attention shifted toward the information she had presented and what it might suggest about the larger situation. Yet the documents and the photograph were only part of the story. The human impact of Operation Hollow River was still unfolding. At that moment, the courtroom door at the back opened quietly. There was no formal announcement. People turned instinctively. A woman walked slowly down the center aisle. It was Eloise Wilkins, Darius's grandmother. She was small in stature, with gray hair framing a face marked by both loss and strength. She walked with the help of a simple wooden cane, each step steady. The soft sound of the cane echoed through the room, carrying a quiet sense of endurance. She did not appear intimidated by the setting or the people present. There was a firmness in her posture that reflected resilience. Jasmine looked up and for the first time, her composure seemed to soften slightly. Without speaking, she stepped aside near the witness stand. Eloise approached without hesitation. She adjusted the microphone, cleared her throat gently, and looked directly at Justice Thomas. Her gaze was steady. "I buried my daughter," she said quietly, her voice firm. "Years ago. She paused briefly. Then I buried my grandson, Darius. No one moved. No one spoke. The only thing I have wanted since then, she continued, is to understand what happened. Not what was written in official letters. Not what was shared publicly. What truly happened. She reached into her purse and took out a photograph, worn from years of handling. Her hand trembled slightly as she held it up. It showed Darius as a young man, smiling in his army uniform, standing beside an older car. He loved that car, Eloise said softly. He said he would fix it when he came home. She paused, gathering herself. But he never came home. And we were never told why. Her voice broke slightly on the last word, not from weakness, but from the weight of loss and unanswered questions. The courtroom remained silent, but the atmosphere felt heavier, more reflective. Then another woman approached the witness stand. She had short auburn hair and a serious expression. She wore a simple navy blazer and held a small folder in her hands. Her name was Susan Hale. At first, it meant little to those present. But her introduction clarified her role, former Army nurse with a strong service record. I was on duty the night Private First Class Darius Wilkins was brought in, she began quietly. Her voice was soft, but it drew the room's attention. We were told the situation was classified. We were instructed not to ask questions. She paused, taking a breath, her hands pressed together. But I saw him, she continued, her voice unsteady. He was still breathing. The statement aligned with the earlier report. Signs of life had been noted, but no follow-up recorded. I remember, she said, her voice tightening. He kept saying, "Tell my mom I'm okay." He repeated it as if hoping someone would respond. She paused again, struggling to continue. No one answered him. No one came. And he died alone. A reporter lowered her camera, visibly affected. A juror gripped the armrest tightly. The testimony carried a weight that extended beyond documentation. Susan Hale appeared deeply affected, as though she had carried this memory for a long time. Her words, combined with Eloise Wilkins' statement, shifted the focus from procedure to personal impact. The situation was no longer defined only by records or images, but by lived experience. The room remained quiet as the meaning of their testimonies settled in. Then Jasmine Crockett moved forward once more. With the emotional weight still present, she gave a small signal to a technician. The lights dimmed slightly, drawing attention to the front of the room. A faint sound came through the speakers, followed by a brief moment of static. Then a voice played, calm, measured, and clearly recognizable. It was Clarence Thomas. If the situation escalates, the voice said, and information about a protocol issue becomes public, it could contain the spread of the story.